The desert sun spilled gold over Dubai's skyline, its light glinting off towers Khalid once believed would make him immortal. From the 60th floor of his office, Sheikh Khalid al-Mansour looked down at the empire he had built. Hotels, estates, and properties stretched across continents. His name carried weight in boardrooms and whispers in private clubs. Yet at 56, wealth had lost its luster. The silence in his penthouse echoed louder than the hum of the city below. For years, Khalid convinced himself that success was enough. But late nights reminded him of what was missing: laughter at his dinner table, a hand waiting in the dark, someone who saw the man beyond the millions. His marriages had ended in estrangement. His children kept their distance, and friendships thinned as fortunes grew. In the stillness, he was a king without a kingdom. One evening, staring at the city lights, Khalid muttered to himself, "What use is a palace if no one waits at its gates?" His voice, low and tired, was swallowed by the empty room. Business would not allow him to linger on loneliness. A deal awaited in America, in Texas, where oil-rich lands met ambitious investors. He boarded his private jet with the precision of habit, papers in hand, but his mind elsewhere. The flight was long, and Khalid allowed himself a rare vulnerability. He thumbed through an old photograph tucked inside his leather briefcase, a picture of him, decades younger, standing beside his late father. His father's voice haunted him. "A man may rule nations, Khalid, but if he cannot rule his heart, he rules nothing." Hours later, the jet touched down in Houston. The air was different here, humid, heavy, carrying the scent of soil after rain. As his convoy drove through wide highways lined with billboards and diners, Khalid felt an odd sense of anticipation. He had been to America before, but this trip felt strangely fateful. At a luxury hotel downtown, Khalid was greeted by investors and lawyers. Meetings blurred together in a rhythm of numbers and contracts, but beneath his calm exterior, his thoughts drifted. Each handshake reminded him of his father's words. Each smile from a stranger made him wonder if destiny had more to offer than ledgers. That evening, after a day of negotiations, Khalid requested solitude. He wandered into the hotel's bar, a rare decision for a man so guarded. The place was dimly lit, filled with murmurs of laughter and clinking glasses. He sat at the far end, ordered tea instead of whiskey, and watched the crowd with quiet curiosity. And that was when she entered. A woman in her early 30s, striking in presence yet carrying an air of casual ease. She moved through the room like someone who knew the effect she had on others. Khalid noticed how heads turned, how even the bartender stood taller. Her laughter, warm, inviting, cut through the haze of the evening. For the first time in years, Khalid felt something stir within him, fragile but undeniable. He straightened in his chair, eyes fixed, unaware that this single encounter would be the thread that unraveled his carefully woven life. And when their eyes finally met across the dim bar, Khalid had no idea that the charm of a Texas woman would soon eclipse his empire and lead him into a dangerous dream he could never wake from. Amanda Hayes was used to being noticed. At 32, she knew the exact tilt of her smile, the sway of her hips, the way her laugh could fill a room. Yet beneath that polished exterior lay a very different woman. Bills stacked on her kitchen counter back home. Collection agencies left messages she ignored. And every morning, she woke up in a rented apartment that smelled faintly of mildew, staring at the peeling paint above her bed, dreaming of something, anything, better. The hotel bar was not her usual haunt. Amanda had come there on a whim, half hoping a wealthy stranger might ease her burdens for the night. When she spotted Khalid sitting alone, his tailored suit immaculate, his watch glinting under the muted light, she knew instantly. Here was no ordinary man. Their eyes met across the room. Khalid, usually reserved, felt himself drawn to her confidence. Amanda, ever the performer, offered a smile, warm, deliberate, a hook cast into deep waters. She crossed the room slowly, heels tapping softly against the polished floor. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, her Texan drawl smooth as honey. Khalid inclined his head, gesturing to the empty stool beside him. "Please, it would be an honor." She laughed lightly, settling in, signaling the bartender with a practiced wave. "An honor? That's a first." He studied her with quiet curiosity. Amanda leaned closer, catching the faint scent of his cologne. Expensive, understated, the kind reserved for men of means. She didn't need to ask who he was. His posture, his calm confidence, and the subtle deference of the staff told her enough. Within minutes, Amanda steered the conversation from pleasantries to curiosity. "So, what brings a man like you to Texas?" she asked, eyes sparkling. "Business," Khalid replied, his voice steady but softened by her presence. "But perhaps also fate." Amanda smiled, though behind her gaze her thoughts raced. Business means money. Fate means weakness. He's not just rich, he's lonely. She leaned on the bar, feigning casual interest. "Well, Texas has a way of surprising people." The night unfolded with surprising ease. Amanda's laughter filled the spaces where Khalid's silences lingered. He spoke of travel, of cultures, of the burden of responsibility. She offered fragments of her own life, carefully edited, an independent woman, adventurous, misunderstood by men too small-minded to appreciate her. Not once did she mention her debts, her failed relationships, or the desperate voicemail she had ignored just hours before. As the evening wore on, Khalid felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. Amanda's presence was intoxicating, a balm to the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. For her, every word, every smile was part of a delicate performance. She didn't see Khalid the man. She saw his empire. By the time the bar began to empty, Amanda had secured more than his attention. She had secured an invitation. "Perhaps tomorrow," Khalid said as they stood, "you might join me for dinner. I would enjoy your company." Amanda touched his arm, her eyes shimmering with feigned sincerity. "I'd love that." As she walked away, Khalid watched her with a quiet hope he hadn't felt in years. Amanda, however, smiled for an entirely different reason. She had found her mark. What began as a chance encounter was already shifting into something more dangerous. By the time Amanda closed her apartment door that night, she wasn't thinking of romance. She was thinking of property deeds, wealth, and the fortune of a man who had just fallen into her hands. Dinner the following night was everything Amanda had hoped for. A private suite at one of Houston's finest restaurants, a table lit by candlelight, wine chosen by a sommelier who greeted Khalid by name. From the moment she arrived, Amanda understood the scale of his world. The staff's reverence, the quiet luxury. It was confirmation that she had struck gold. Khalid, meanwhile, was captivated. Amanda's beauty shimmered under the soft glow of the chandeliers, but it was her attention that disarmed him. She laughed at his jokes, leaned in when he spoke, touched his hand as though his words carried weight. For a man who had spent years in isolation, the illusion of being understood was intoxicating. As they dined, Amanda steered the conversation with precision. "You must travel constantly," she said, twirling her glass of wine. "It sounds exciting, but doesn't it ever feel lonely?" Khalid hesitated, then nodded. "It does. Often. My work gives me everything, and nothing at the same time." Amanda reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "Then maybe what you need isn't more work. Maybe what you need is someone who truly sees you." The words sank deep, leaving Khalid exposed. She smiled sweetly, but in her mind, she was already calculating. Every detail he revealed, his exhaustion, his trust, his estrangement from family, was another thread she could weave into her net. Over the weeks that followed, Amanda positioned herself carefully. She became his confidant, his companion, the presence he craved at the end of each day. She asked about his business, feigning admiration while storing away every fact. The number of properties, their locations, the scope of his wealth. It was all fuel for her growing ambition. "You own places in Texas too?" she asked one night, feigning casual curiosity. "Yes," Khalid admitted softly. "Some land, a few houses. They are investments for the future." Amanda's lips curved into a smile. Investments for my future, she thought. Khalid, blind to her motives, gave freely. He believed Amanda's interest came from love, not greed. He saw her as a woman who cared for the man beneath the titles, not the sheikh with an empire. And each time she leaned against him, whispering how safe she felt by his side, he believed it a little more. But shadows lingered behind her charm. At night, in the silence of her apartment, Amanda's mask slipped. She stared at the unpaid bills on her counter, the collection notices shoved in drawers, and reminded herself why she had to keep pushing. This wasn't just about romance. It was survival. Still, there were moments when Khalid's sincerity almost pierced through. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, he paused to gaze at the city lights. "Amanda," he said quietly, "you make me believe that love is possible again." For a brief second, she felt a pang of guilt. Then she smothered it, looping her arm through his. "That's because it is," she whispered, her voice laced with practiced tenderness. Behind her smile, though, the calculation never stopped. Every word, every touch, was a step closer to the fortune she craved. Khalid was falling deeper, and Amanda knew she only had to keep playing the part until the moment came to take everything. Yet, as Amanda tightened her grip on Khalid's heart, cracks began to show in his carefully constructed world. The wealth that made him powerful also revealed his deepest weakness, a secret loneliness that she would soon exploit. Khalid's empire stretched across borders, but behind the glossy surface of success was a man fractured by silence. His board meetings ran like clockwork, his investments thrived, and his name appeared in international headlines as a figure of power. Yet when the lights dimmed and the doors closed, what remained was an empty apartment, a phone that rarely rang, and memories that cut deeper with age. Amanda had begun to notice the cracks. Whenever Khalid spoke of family, his eyes grew distant, his voice softened. His children lived abroad, tethered more to their inheritance than to him. Years of strained marriages had left scars that time couldn't heal. They spoke to him out of obligation, not love, and Khalid, proud yet aching, tried to mask the wound. One evening, Amanda pressed gently, her voice sweet with curiosity. "You never talk much about them. Don't they visit?" Khalid exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Not often. Wealth divides more than it unites. To them I am a bank, not a father." Amanda tilted her head, offering sympathy. "That must be hard." "It is," he admitted, his voice cracking for the first time. "I built everything for them, and yet when I need them most, they are strangers." Amanda reached for his hand, squeezing it with practiced tenderness. "Maybe what you need isn't the family you lost. Maybe it's the family you choose." Her words struck the center of his vulnerability. For Khalid, who longed for connection, Amanda's presence became the bridge between despair and hope. For Amanda, every revelation was another opening, a way to root herself deeper in his life. She began to position herself as indispensable. She filled the silence with warmth, reminding him she was different, that she wanted him rather than his empire. She cooked for him in her small kitchen, laughed at his stories, and listened to his late-night confessions. Sheikh Khalid. Each moment she played the role of a partner, the tighter his trust wrapped around her. But in truth, Amanda's interest was sharpened by calculation. She took mental notes each time he mentioned his assets. Dubai, London, Houston. The more Khalid shared, the clearer the map of his fortune became. She smiled as he spoke, but inside, her mind was already arranging possibilities, already measuring the weight of what could be hers. Khalid, blind to her schemes, allowed himself to hope. For the first time in years, he no longer dreaded the evenings. When Amanda leaned against him on the couch, when her laughter filled the empty spaces of his life, he convinced himself he had finally found the love that had eluded him. Still, shadows trailed him. Some nights he stood by the window of Amanda's apartment, staring at the city lights, wondering if he had been too quick to trust. His instincts whispered caution, but loneliness spoke louder. And Amanda knew it. She pressed closer each time doubt flickered across his face, smothering hesitation with charm. The deeper his cracks showed, the easier it became for her to slip inside. But while Khalid clung to Amanda for comfort, her thoughts strayed elsewhere. Debt collectors called, past mistakes closed in, and with every passing day her hunger for more grew, a hunger that would soon awaken a dangerous greed. Amanda's smile could light up a room, but her nights were darker than she let anyone see. Beneath the polished exterior, her life teetered on the edge of collapse. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter like silent threats. Creditors called with increasing aggression, their voices sharp and unforgiving. Every past mistake, unpaid rent, reckless spending, failed relationships, loomed like a shadow that refused to fade. She told Khalid none of this. To him, she was carefree, radiant, a woman untouched by the world's cruelty. But inside, Amanda's thoughts churned. Each time she looked at Khalid's Rolex, each time she slipped into one of the gowns he bought her, she felt the gnawing hunger grow stronger. One late evening, after Khalid had left her apartment, Amanda sat alone at her kitchen table. A single bulb buzzed overhead, casting her in pale light. She stared at the stack of overdue notices and whispered, almost to herself, "This could all disappear, if I play it right." She thought of Khalid's words from the night before. "I own properties everywhere. Texas, Dubai, London. They are all part of my legacy." The phrase replayed in her head, not as a confession, but as an invitation. Amanda leaned back in her chair, her lips curling into a smile. Why should his fortune be wasted on children who barely care? Why should he grow old surrounded by wealth he doesn't even enjoy? In her mind, she twisted her desperation into justification. If she was clever, if she was bold, she could take it all. The next day she slipped easily back into her role, the doting partner. She wrapped her arms around Khalid's waist as he cooked breakfast in her apartment, her voice light and teasing. "You really should let me help you with your business. You work too much." Khalid chuckled softly. "Amanda, the business is complicated. And besides, you are my escape from it all." Her eyes sparkled. "This, or not with affection?" "Maybe so," she said gently. "But I could be more than that. Someone to share your burdens. Someone who cares about more than just money." Khalid smiled, believing her sincerity. Amanda kissed his cheek, but inside her thoughts burned with sharper edges. "Yes," she told herself, "I'll share your burdens. And soon, they'll all belong to me." Her charm hardened in the days that followed. She studied Khalid closely, asking questions cloaked in sweetness. She learned which properties were under his name, which documents he carried when he traveled, even which lawyers handled his estates. Each answer became a puzzle piece, fitting neatly into the picture she was constructing. Yet Amanda's hunger was never satisfied. Even as Khalid showered her with gifts, diamonds, dresses, nights in luxury hotels, she craved more. Gifts were temporary, wealth was permanent, and permanent wealth required boldness. One night, after a heated call from a creditor demanding payment, Amanda slammed her phone onto the couch. Rage welled in her chest, followed by a cold determination. She poured herself a glass of wine, stared at her reflection in the darkened window, and whispered, "Why wait for him to give it to me, when I can take it?" The line between love and calculation dissolved completely. Amanda no longer saw Khalid as a man. He was a key, and behind him stood doors to a life she believed she deserved. And as her debts pressed harder and her fantasies grew bolder, Amanda's tenderness gave way to something far more dangerous. The woman who once played the role of lover was about to become the architect of a ruthless plan. The weeks that followed were gilded in luxury but poisoned at the core. Khalid arrived with gifts that sparkled under Amanda's apartment lights: diamond earrings, silk scarves, and envelopes of cash tucked into her handbag, as if to silence her worries. To outsiders, theirs was a romance drenched in wealth. But behind closed doors, the glitter dulled. Their arguments began small, like hairline cracks in glass. One night, Amanda twirled the diamond earrings between her fingers, her tone deceptively casual. "Lovely," she said, "but don't you think I deserve more than trinkets?" Khalid, lounging on the couch with his tie loosened, frowned. "Amanda, I give you what I can. You have more than most people dream of." She tilted her head, smiling sweetly. "Oh, Khalid, I don't want most people's dreams. I want mine." That night ended with silence, Khalid retreating into sleep while Amanda stared at the ceiling, her mind calculating. The next evening, her strategy sharpened. Over dinner, candlelight flickering between them, she leaned forward. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked. Khalid hesitated. "Of course. My children. My legacy." Her smile faltered, replaced by a faint pout. "So where do I fit into that future? Am I just temporary?" He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Amanda, you are important to me. But some things, they cannot change." Her grip tightened around his fingers. "Everything can change, if you want it badly enough." Khalid's chest tightened. Guilt pooled in him. He had pulled Amanda into a life of excess, into the secrets of his world, yet he resisted her pleas for permanence. And each time he saw her eyes glisten with disappointment, he feared losing her. Late nights became battlegrounds. She pressed harder. Documents, properties, access. He resisted, then relented in small ways, signing her onto a joint account, introducing her to her associates as someone special. Each concession left him uneasy, yet each refusal left him terrified she might walk away. One argument erupted past midnight. Amanda stood by the window, her voice sharp. "You treat me like I'm disposable. Do you think I don't notice?" Khalid rubbed his temples. "Amanda, please. I care for you deeply, but you must understand. There are limits." "Limits?" She spun toward him, eyes flashing. "Is love supposed to have limits? Or is it just convenient for you to keep me waiting while you hoard your fortune?" Khalid's silence was answer enough. His guilt choked him, tangled with fear. He thought of the nights she wasn't there, the cold emptiness of his bed, the gnawing loneliness. She could leave, and that thought terrified him more than her demands. Amanda saw it in his eyes, the weakness, the crack in his armor. She softened her tone instantly, crossing the room to rest her head against his chest. "I just want to be part of your life," she whispered. "Truly part of it. Don't you see? I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for security, for love." He stroked her hair, his resistance faltering. "You already have my love." She smiled faintly against his shirt. "Then prove it." And so, little by little, he did. More access, more promises, more pieces of himself handed over under the weight of guilt and fear. But the love between them was no longer love. It was a transaction, poisoned and uneven. Amanda fed on his vulnerability, while Khalid clung to her as though losing her meant losing the last spark of youth and passion he had left. And as their bond grew more toxic, Amanda's patience wore thin. The taste of control thrilled her, but it was never enough. Soon, she would push past persuasion and into something far darker, something irreversible. Amanda's smile no longer lingered when Khalid wasn't looking. Behind the tender gestures and whispered promises, her mind churned with cold arithmetic. The jewelry, the cash, the access to his accounts, none of it satisfied her. She wanted everything, and patience was no longer her ally. One humid evening, while Khalid attended a late business meeting, Amanda slipped her phone from her purse and scrolled to a number she hadn't dialed in years. The man who answered was a ghost from her past, an old flame-turned hustler, someone who thrived in the shadows where legality blurred. "Didn't think I'd hear from you again," his voice rasped. "I need information," Amanda said, steady but low. "Something permanent. Something final." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Sounds dangerous, but dangerous pays." Over the next weeks, Amanda's mask grew thicker. To Khalid, she played the role of devoted lover, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm with feigned affection, coaxing him into believing she was his only safe harbor. Yet each affectionate glance was camouflage, covering the ruthless plot taking shape in her mind. She began studying him with predatory focus. His daily routines became her blueprint. She noticed the way he favored his left leg when tired, the pills he swallowed each morning without fail, the nights he returned home too weary to lock the door behind him. Every detail mattered. She knew which security guards were most loyal, which ones checked their phones instead of the cameras. She watched where he kept his passport, how often he reviewed his property files, and even which wines left him drowsiest after dinner. Her conversations with the shady acquaintance deepened. He spoke of poisons that left little trace, of accidents staged to look natural, of alibis airtight enough to fool detectives. Amanda listened, absorbing each possibility, like a student preparing FACE or an exam. "Are you sure you can handle this?" the man asked during one hushed call. "This isn't petty theft. This is blood." Amanda's silence stretched. Then she whispered, "I've handled worse. He's old, he's rich, and he thinks he can control me. But soon, he won't control anything at all." Still, doubt flickered in the quiet moments. Brief pangs when Khalid looked at her with genuine tenderness. But greed smothered hesitation. She remembered the debt collectors pounding on her door, the hollow promises of her past lovers, the gnawing hunger for a life she believed she deserved. Khalid wasn't a man to her anymore. He was a key. And if that key had to be broken to open the door, so be it. She crafted her alibi with care. She booked a spa weekend weeks in advance, dropped hints to friends about a girls' trip, and began collecting receipts that would later prove her absence. Each detail was rehearsed until she could deliver it without a tremor. Meanwhile, Khalid noticed changes but misread them. When she grew distant, he assumed it was another of their quarrels. When she smiled thinly, he believed it was fatigue. He had grown so accustomed to her moods that he never questioned the shadow hardening in her eyes. One night, as Khalid drifted to sleep beside her, Amanda lay awake, staring into the darkness. Her pulse quickened with both fear and exhilaration. She could almost see the future, herself draped in luxury, signing papers that once bore his name, walking into rooms where she would no longer be a guest but the owner. "Soon," she whispered into the night, her words swallowed by the hum of the air conditioner. "Soon. It will all be mine." And with that, Amanda closed her eyes, her decision complete. What began as seduction had twisted into strategy, and strategy had hardened into murder. The ruthless plot was no longer just an idea. It was a countdown. What Amanda didn't realize, however, was that the path to murder is never as smooth as the dream. Every plan has its cracks, and hers would soon face the test of reality. The storm came suddenly, sweeping across the Texas plains with a violence that rattled windows and drowned the night in sheets of rain. Thunder cracked above Amanda's modest home, each strike echoing like a drumbeat of fate. Inside, the lights flickered, casting the living room in a jittery glow. Khalid sat heavily in the armchair, his posture weary, his silk shirt damp at the collar from the rain. He had arrived earlier than expected, hoping to surprise Amanda with dinner, only to find her oddly calm, almost too composed. A glass of red wine waited for him on the table. "Rough night," Amanda whispered, brushing a hand along his shoulder. Her voice was honey, her smile practiced warmth. Khalid managed a tired laugh. "Business wears me down more than I admit, but being here with you, it makes me forget." He didn't see the way her eyes shifted, glinting under the dim light. She had rehearsed this moment endlessly. The storm outside was an ally, its howls and crashes covering the sound of her racing heart. For an hour she played the part perfectly, tender laughter, gentle touches, the illusion of devotion. They sat close, the television flickering in the background, his hand resting trustingly in hers. She refilled his glass, guiding his sips, watching the way his eyelids grew heavier. But Khalid wasn't poisoned. Amanda hadn't trusted the chemicals she'd been offered. Instead, she had chosen something more direct, more brutal. Her plan was written in steel, hidden beneath the cushions of the couch. As the clock struck midnight, Khalid leaned back, sighing. "You are my peace, Amanda," he murmured. His voice, soft and unguarded, cut into her like a blade. For the briefest second, her chest tightened. She saw the man who had given her gifts, who had whispered promises in foreign cities, who had, in his own way, loved her. But then came the reminder of her debts, her failures. The gnawing hunger for wealth that had burned away doubt. Compassion was a luxury she could no longer afford. Amanda stood slowly, brushing her hair back with trembling fingers. "Stay there," she said, her tone light. "I'll get us another bottle." She slipped into the kitchen, her bare feet silent against the tile. From beneath a stack of dish towels in the drawer, she retrieved the knife she had hidden days before. Its blade gleamed cold in the unsteady light, long enough to pierce deep, sharp enough to silence. Her breaths came shallow as she walked back into the living room. Khalid's eyes were half closed, a faint smile on his lips. He didn't stir when she approached, didn't question the shadow stretching across the floor. Amanda raised the knife, her hands trembling. For one heartbeat she froze, the storm's roar filling her ears. Doubt screamed, begging her to stop. But greed was louder. With a sudden, desperate thrust, the blade sank into his chest. Khalid's eyes flew open, shock flashing before pain consumed him. He gasped, his hand reaching for her, confusion etched across his face. "Amanda, why?" His voice was barely a whisper, carried away by the storm. She yanked the knife free, crimson spilling across his shirt. Her breath came ragged as she struck again, silencing his words, drowning the room in the wet rhythm of steel against flesh. His body shuddered, then collapsed into stillness. The storm outside raged on, masking the sounds of death. Amanda stumbled back, the knife slipping from her slick fingers, clattering to the floor. Her hands shook violently, painted red, her reflection staring back from the glossy surface of spilled wine. For a long moment there was only silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the storm's mournful howl. Khalid lay motionless, eyes wide, the life that once commanded empires now reduced to a lifeless shell in a stranger's home. Amanda pressed her hands to her face, her breath shallow and frantic. She had imagined triumph, freedom, power. Instead, the weight of the act pressed down on her chest like stone. But she couldn't stop now. There was no turning back. Slowly, she forced herself to her feet. Her eyes scanned the room. The wineglass, the bloodstains, the knife. Every detail screamed evidence. She clenched her fists, steadying herself. "Clean it up," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "Clean it all up." Outside, the storm roared louder, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to the crime. And within that house, Amanda began the grim work of transforming murder into silence. But storms always pass, and when the dawn breaks, secrets refuse to stay buried. Amanda would soon learn that covering blood is far easier than escaping its stain. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the Texas sky washed in pale grey. Amanda stood at the kitchen counter, her hands steady now, her eyes cold. The horror of the night had been folded neatly into the shadows of her mind. She had a new role to play, one that required precision, not panic. The first task was paper. Khalid's briefcase sat open on the dining table, its leather darkened by smears she had already wiped away. Inside were documents, property deeds, bank correspondence, letters with official seals from Dubai. Amanda's fingers lingered over the embossed crests, the signatures penned in Khalid's careful script. She practiced his name slowly at first, tracing each flourish on scrap paper until the motion felt natural. Soon her forgeries filled the pages. Khalid's signature authorizing transfers, agreements amended in her favor, a will rewritten in subtle strokes. She whispered as she wrote, "All mine now." But signatures alone wouldn't win her fortune. She needed voices to believe the story. By mid-morning she called neighbors, her tone drenched in concern. "Khalid had to leave suddenly," she explained with a tired sigh. "Family emergency, And Dubai. He didn't even have time to say goodbye. To friends, she painted a softer lie. He wasn't feeling well. He needed rest, space. I promised I'd look after things until he came back. And to his associates overseas, she was even bolder. Using his phone, she sent clipped messages, brief, business-like updates. "Handle the paperwork through Amanda. I trust her." At first the responses were unquestioning. Why wouldn't they be? Khalid had always been private, often vanishing on sudden trips. Amanda's charm filled the gaps, her voice warm, her tone convincing. But cracks began to show quickly. A neighbor spotted her hauling heavy trash bags late at night, her face pale in the moonlight. A former girlfriend of Khalid's called, curious about his abrupt silence, pressing Amanda with questions she deflected too quickly. Even the bank officer hesitated over the forged signature, tilting the document under the light before reluctantly stamping it. Each lie patched one hole but tore another. Amanda felt the walls tighten, suspicion pressing in. Still, she pressed forward. She met with a notary, masking her nerves with a wide smile. She practiced Khalid's clipped accent in voicemails, covering the distance between continents with careful impersonation. But every deception demanded more energy, more precision. One slip, one misstep, and everything could collapse. Late at night, Amanda sat at the dining table surrounded by papers, her hands ink-stained, her eyes hollow. The house still smelled faintly of bleach, the memory of blood lurking just beneath the surface. She told herself the struggle was temporary. Once the deeds were secured, once the money was in her hands, the world would finally open. She would vanish into wealth, far from suspicion, far from Khalid's ghost. Yet sometimes, in the silence between phone calls and forged signatures, she swore she heard him, the faint echo of his voice, the question he had gasped with his final breath. "Amanda, why?" The memory gnawed at her, weakening her confidence. She shook it off, gripping her pen tighter, forging another line, another lie. Outside, the world believed her for now. But beneath the surface, doubt stirred. Amanda had rewritten Khalid's story on paper, but truth has a way of bleeding through ink. Soon, whispers would grow louder. Associates, neighbors, and investigators would begin to connect the dots. Amanda's empire of lies was destined to crack, and the cost of truth would finally come for her. At first, Amanda's lies held like freshly poured cement, smooth, convincing, and unchallenged. But cement always cracks, and soon the fractures began to show. In the quiet office of the Travis County Sheriff's Department, a detective leaned back in his chair, reviewing reports on the foreign businessman who had supposedly left town overnight. Something about it didn't fit. Sheikh Khalid was too prominent, too visible, to vanish without a trace. Neighbors had already whispered. One recalled the stormy night and Amanda's frantic trips to the curb with trash bags that sagged with weight. Another mentioned hearing raised voices, Amanda's sharp tone cutting through the thunder, followed by silence. Then came the bank. A junior officer, uneasy with Khalid's forged signature, reported his concern up the chain. The loops were too shaky, the pressure inconsistent. It didn't look like the confident hand of a seasoned businessman. That single doubt landed on a detective's desk, where it was joined by the neighbors' accounts, and the unusual timing of Amanda's property filings. Meanwhile, Amanda played her part with polished ease. She smiled at questions, laughed off concerns, and carried herself with the poise of a grieving partner managing affairs. Yet behind closed doors, her nerves betrayed her. She jumped at every knock on the door, every unexpected ring of the phone. Her attempts at control made her look more suspicious. She called Khalid's associates in Dubai too often, over-explaining his absence. She filed paperwork with desperate speed, as though afraid of waiting too long. To the casual observer, she seemed efficient. To investigators, she seemed frantic. Detective Alvarez was the first to voice what others only hinted. "People don't disappear like this," he said to his partner, flipping through Amanda's statements. "And women don't file deeds before the body's cold, unless they know the body isn't coming back." As interviews unfolded, contradictions emerged. Amanda told one neighbor Khalid had flown out for a family emergency. To another, she claimed he was sick in bed overseas. When pressed by a banker, she insisted he had given her power of attorney, though no official record supported it. The lies tangled like vines, and investigators began trimming them one by one. Meanwhile, Khalid's world reached out from across the ocean. His younger brother in Dubai grew concerned after days of silence. Emails unanswered. Calls ignored. When Amanda finally answered, her tone was too light, too rehearsed. He hung up uneasy, his instincts telling him something was deeply wrong. Within weeks, the sheriff's office had opened an inquiry. Officially, Khalid was listed as missing. Unofficially, Amanda's name circled every report. Still, Amanda clung to her performance. She hosted a small gathering, serving wine and wearing a forced smile. "Khalid's resting abroad," she told guests smoothly. "He trusts me with everything. I'm handling his business until he's ready to return." But her neighbors noticed the way her hands shook when she poured their drinks, the way her eyes darted to the window whenever a car slowed outside. They noticed the faint scent of bleach that never seemed to leave her home. Suspicion had grown roots, and it was spreading fast. By the time Amanda realized how tightly the circles, it was closing, it was too late. Detectives had already begun tracing her steps, checking her alibi, and digging into the stormy night when Khalid was last seen alive. Her empire of lies, once bold and confident, was beginning to crumble under the weight of truth, and soon the cracks would burst wide open. When the evidence surfaced, Amanda's carefully built facade would collapse, dragging her into the one place she could no longer control, the hands of justice. Detectives summoned Amanda to the sheriff's office under the pretense of routine clarification. She arrived in a tailored black dress, her hair perfectly styled, her smile rehearsed. To anyone watching, she was calm, gracious, even cooperative, But inside the interrogation room, the air shifted. Detective Morales, tall and watchful, leaned forward. "Mrs. Amanda, thank you for coming in. We just have a few loose ends to tie up." Amanda smoothed the hem of her skirt. "Of course. I want to help in any way I can." Detective Harris slid a folder across the table. "Then maybe you can explain this." Inside lay copies of property transfer forms, Khalid's signature scrawled at the bottom. "We had these analyzed. The handwriting doesn't match Khalid's records, not even close." Amanda's eyes flickered. Only for a second. Then she chuckled softly. "Khalid was tired of lawyers. He rushed things, you know. English wasn't his strong suit. Maybe his hand slipped." Morales raised a brow. "Funny, because the forensic examiner says it's your handwriting. Care to comment?" A silence stretched thin. Amanda tilted her head, lips curling. "Are you accusing me of forgery, Detective?" "We're saying it looks bad," Morales replied evenly. "And it's not the only thing." Harris opened another folder, revealing a series of photographs. "This was the rug from your living room. Our lab found traces of blood soaked deep into the fibers. Not animal blood. Human." Amanda's shoulders stiffened. She forced a laugh. "That house has seen plenty of guests. A cut finger, a nosebleed. These things happen." "Funny," Morales said, "because the DNA matches Khalid." For the first time, Amanda's face paled. Her hands clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. She recovered quickly, leaning back in her chair with an air of defiance. "DNA tests make mistakes. Maybe you mixed samples. Unless you found a body, detectives, you have nothing." The words hung heavy. Morales exchanged a look with Harris, who pressed further. "Neighbors say they heard shouting the night Khalid disappeared. They recall him calling your name. One even saw you dragging heavy trash bags to your car. Want to explain that?" Amanda's lips parted, but no words came. She blinked, gathering herself, then whispered sharply, "People gossip. Texans love their stories. I carried laundry. Is that now a crime?" Morales folded his arms, voice low and steady. "It's not gossip when 3 different people say the same thing. And when we have receipts showing you bought industrial-strength bleach the very next morning." Amanda's mask cracked further. Beads of sweat formed at her temple. She dabbed them with a tissue, her polished demeanor slipping. "I like my house clean," she muttered. "Clean," Harris repeated, his tone cutting. "Or spotless." Amanda shot him a glare. "You think you're clever, but you're wasting my time. Khalid isn't dead. He left. He always threatened to. Maybe he went back to Dubai. Did you ever consider that?" Morales leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "We did. We contacted Dubai. His associates haven't heard from him. His accounts show no activity. His passport hasn't been used. Amanda, the truth is closing in on you." Amanda's jaw tightened. She forced a brittle smile, but her eyes betrayed the storm beneath. "Until you produce a body, detectives, you have nothing but theories." The room fell into silence, punctuated only by the ticking of the wall clock. The detectives exchanged. At another glance, one of grim certainty. They knew Amanda was lying. They just needed the final piece to prove it. As Amanda gathered her purse and stood, Harris called after her, "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts." Amanda paused at the door. Her back straightened, her voice icy. "I intend to." But as she walked out of the station, heels clicking sharply against the tile, her composure wavered. The walls were closing in, and she knew it. The trap was set. All that remained was the moment it snapped shut. The morning Amanda was arrested, the Texas sun burned mercilessly overhead, as if determined to spotlight her downfall. Detectives arrived at her doorstep with a warrant, their expressions stern, unyielding. Neighbors peered through curtains as Amanda, still in her silk robe, was handcuffed on her own porch. She held her chin high, but her eyes darted nervously at the whispering crowd. At the county jail, charges were read: fraud, forgery, obstruction, and finally, murder. The words seemed to echo off the sterile walls. Amanda laughed bitterly. Murder? Without a body? Good luck convincing a jury. But the prosecutors were ready. The courtroom soon became a theatre of betrayal, greed, and unravelling lies. Reporters filled the benches, cameras flashing whenever Amanda entered in her tailored suits, trying to project confidence. Yet behind her poise, her eyes betrayed exhaustion, fear, and the creeping awareness that the empire she built on deception was crumbling. The state presented its case with relentless precision. Forensic experts testified about the blood in the rug, the bleach traces on the tiles, the forged property documents. A handwriting specialist demonstrated how Amanda's loops and strokes betrayed her attempt at forging Khalid's signature. Neighbors took the stand, describing heated arguments, Khalid's raised voice, and Amanda's shadow moving across the yard with heavy bags. But the most devastating blow came from Khalid's Dubai associates, who flew in to testify. One spoke in a trembling voice. Khalid was proud of his new home in Texas. He planned to return to Dubai later that year. He would never have vanished willingly. He trusted Amanda. That trust killed him. Amanda's defense team tried to spin another narrative. Khalid had enemies overseas. Perhaps he fled to escape them. Maybe the state was scapegoating a grieving woman. Amanda herself took the stand, her voice calm, her tone measured. Khalid loved me. He was restless, yes, but he wasn't murdered. He left. And the state, desperate for answers, invented this story. The jury watched her closely. Some leaned forward, fascinated by her composure, while others studied the evidence piled against her. It was a battle of image versus fact, charm against proof. As closing arguments ended, the prosecutor's words lingered in the hushed courtroom. This isn't just about wealth or property. It's about a man who trusted the wrong person, who reached for love and found betrayal. Amanda saw his loneliness not as something to heal, but as an opportunity to exploit. That is why Khalid is gone, and that is why she must answer for it. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When they returned, the foreman's voice rang clear. Guilty on all counts. Amanda sat motionless, her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Her carefully crafted mask finally shattered. The gavel struck. Life in prison, without parole. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, headlines already forming. The widow of greed, Texas femme fatale convicted. Yet amid the spectacle, one detail remained: the absence of Khalid's body. Justice had been declared, but his final resting place remained hidden, swallowed by Amanda's silence. In the closing narration, Khalid's image emerged not as the wealthy foreigner many had whispered about, but as a man undone by the simplest human need, companionship. He was remembered for his vulnerability, for trusting too deeply, for believe it. None love could shield him from loneliness. Amanda, once the architect of her own fortune, became the architect of her ruin. Her hunger for power consumed everything: Khalid's life, her freedom, even her own identity. And so the story closed not with triumph, but with tragedy. 2 lives destroyed, one by betrayal and the other by greed, leaving behind only whispers in the Texas wind and a haunting reminder. The shadows of justice may not bring back the dead, but they never forget the truth.